Welcome to the Own It Powercast, the place to be when you get serious about making big changes and accelerating growth in your life and in your relationships. Finally create the life you've always wanted, living life on your own terms. Learn how to take your fear and turn it into powerful choices that will create sustained change. Now your host, Mary Baker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own It Powercast, the place to come to get what you need to move yourself forward. Hey, it's Mary Baker and welcome to episode 245, The Path to Healthy Boundaries, Understanding Detachment and Grieving. Well, welcome back to this month, which is all about healthy boundaries, such an important topic. Each week we're going to be diving into what I think are some important aspects of boundary work. Last week, we focused on why boundaries are not control. And I think in that same vein, this week we're going to get into how boundaries are actually all about letting go of control. And yet in order to do this, we need to practice healthy detachment and do the grief work that comes up when we let go. But first, I want to remind you about the great mini course ebook I have available, and that is my Boundaries ebook. I think it has a lot of great information, including many podcasts and worksheets and thought provokers, because you got to do the work to get the reward. So it's experiential, which I think is a great way of learning and a great way to figure out where are your struggles with boundaries. So that's free. So don't miss that. The link for that is in the show notes. So go ahead and grab that today. And if you need more in-depth work on boundaries, my Find Your Voice course is all about that and so much more. There's 12 modules. It's an immersive experience for 6 months. You get the group coaching aspect and some one-on-one with me if you so desire. So it talks about all the great pieces of empowerment that I have figured out over the years are necessary to really be the authentic person we want to be. The link for that course is in the show notes as well. And if you have any questions about any of that stuff, please reach out. All right, so let's get into the concepts of detachment and grieving. Not fun topic titles, are they? But they're necessary. Like I said, one of the most essential aspects of boundary work that I think often gets overlooked and isn't talked about enough is the art of detaching from other people's caca. Like we talked about last week. Other people's thoughts, their feelings, their behaviors, and their choices. Because here's the deal. If we don't tackle this part of boundary work, we're missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. We can't do boundaries in a healthy way without it. So first, let's define detachment in case you aren't familiar. And even if you're familiar, it takes a while to get your head wrapped around what it really is. And it's technically the practice of observing our thoughts, our feelings, and situations without getting caught up in them. Easier said than done. It means creating some kind of emotional space to maintain our inner peace and our clarity. And essentially what it does in the end is it allows us to have healthier responses and boundaries. And you know what that means. It means not focusing on the other and or the outcome, and especially what you can do to fix, change, undo said outcome. Instead, you're going to focus on the who owns what that we talk about all the time here on the show, and I think it's really important. And then we regroup back to only what is on your side. So what's about them and what's about you? Who owns what? What belongs to them are their feelings, their choices, their beliefs, their behaviors, their inability to get it, their inability to do the right thing, to care about you, to see you. I mean, the list could be endless. But it's all about them, what belongs to another person versus what belongs to you. So you bring it back to yourself. How do I feel about their choices? How do I feel about their behaviors? What does it mean? What are my fears? What are the consequences that I'm worried about from their behaviors? And I could be dead on in terms of what might happen. It's not about arguing facts. This is about something else. possibly maybe my shame or my guilt coming up around this? What is all that? And then especially what seems overwhelming, insurmountable, impossible, devastating, or even the opposite of all of that heavy. What would be just so fabulous if I could just, right, make that happen, get them to see, get them to do different. But we can't. That's all control. Detachment doesn't mean you don't care. It simply means you take your hands off things that aren't yours. Why is it good? Well, first of all, if you've been doing the other things in your relationships, I'm sure you've seen how well that's gone. Every once in a while, you get some positive feedback like, yeah, I talked her into that and it went really well. Believe me, that's the anomaly. Typically, it doesn't go well. It doesn't make the situation any better and it wrecks the relationship. Detachment makes it so much healthier and safer. It gets you out of the fight or flight. It gets you out of trying to control things you can't. It stops you from ruminating. It helps you stay on your side and take responsibility for you, like we're going to talk about today. And it allows you to take care of yourself. You can't be all caught up in someone's stuff and take good care of you. Not possible. Not possible. People try every day. You can't do both. Detachment, I think, is like hitting the reset button on our emotional well-being. That's why it's great for our self-care. It's about creating that space between ourselves and the swirling whirlpool of other people's stuff, all their little tornadoes, all their chaos, all their crazy, their drama, their consequences of not getting it together, their opinions, their actions. Those are not ours to carry. Those are not ours to carry. When we learn to detach with compassion, with love, I think we reclaim our energy, eventually our peace of mind, and our sense of self. That's a process depending on how long and how hard you've been caught up in their stuff. That's what people mean when they say losing yourself in a relationship. And oftentimes losing yourself in a relationship with someone who is selfish, narcissistic, irresponsible, addicted, someone you haven't set great boundaries with in the past, someone you have probably rescued in the past. That could be a partner, a parent, a sibling, a friend, or your child. So for example, let's say you're in a conversation with a friend who always seems to bring a cloud of negativity with them. They're always complaining, they're worried all the time, they have a constant need for validation. And it just weighs on you. You absorb that. It's hard not to absorb that over time. But here's the kicker. You don't have to carry that weight. Detachment is about recognizing that their caca is not yours to clean up, and you can't. You can't really. You can put Band-Aids on stuff for people. You can bail them out this time. They're just going to create a bigger mess next week. They're the only ones who can truly clean things up. Maybe it's your sibling or your partner who just can't grow up. So detachment means I take my hands off of it because it's not mine. And instead focus on what is mine. And that's good boundaries. The boundary that determines where you end and they begin. But here's the thing. When we practice detachment, and it's a practice, and there's a lot of resistance to it at first. It's so normal to not want to do it. You have a lot of fear that comes up. I'm asking you to pry your hands off something, and that's not going to be easy because the stakes are high. It's easy to let go when there aren't big consequences. But what if I'm asking you to take your hands off the idea of your partner's responsibility or your child doing well in school or your parent being open to proper assistance and medical care before things get worse? When we let go, then we grieve. We don't do a lot of grief work until we let go because that's the whole thing we're trying to avoid, the overwhelming feelings or our fear of overwhelming feelings and our fear that we can't handle them. I think it really lies in the perception. So let's talk about grieving in the context of boundary setting. That might seem odd at first, but why would we need to grieve when we're setting boundaries? Well, here's the thing. Boundaries, like I just said, require us to let go of what was, to let go of what could have been or what we wish things were like. Remember, we're grieving the dream, not the reality. We're very familiar with the awful reality we're sitting in, perhaps. And grieving isn't just about losing someone or something, and I think that's where we get stuck. It's really about anything that feels like a loss, and it's about acknowledging the pain, the disappointment, or the unmet expectations. Maybe you're grieving the loss of a friendship that no longer serves you, and that's hard. Or the fantasy of a family member finally understanding your point of view. Grieving the career you worked so hard to create, and it's really letting you down. Or the loving family you were never born into. Your family now can't meet your needs. Maybe your partner isn't who you need them to be and probably will never be. Whatever it may be, allowing ourselves to grieve is a powerful act of self-compassion, and it's not for sissies. But we're saying to ourselves, I can't fix that, I can't control it, I can't make them do that, I can't stop them from doing that. And it's okay to let go of what no longer serves me, and it's okay to feel. Now I want to stop here for a moment and say, if you struggle with this, it's because, like we've talked about before here on the show, you didn't get to grieve growing up. It probably wasn't safe. No one taught you. No one held the space for you. No one held you so you could grieve. No one validated your feelings. It probably wasn't safe to do any of that. So what you've learned to do to survive is two things. Shut all that down and focus on fixing everyone else instead so that you don't have to feel it. The math works, but it's really unhealthy. So when we talk about boundary setting, we have to remember the importance of detachment and grieving. Remember, it's not shutting yourself off. It's not that you don't care. It's that you don't control. It's about creating boundaries that honor our values, our needs, and our own well-being, despite and separate from whatever's going on for the other person. Despite and separate from whatever's going on for the other person. That is the kicker. That's what's really hard. And because some people don't want you to let go. Other people do. I'll tell you one thing. They will feel it intuitively when you have turned away, in a sense, in terms of your focus and your control and trying to fix them and ruminate about them and rescue them. They will feel the shift. Some people really appreciate it. Other people do not. The people who do not are the ones who want to be rescued from their own self-created chaos. The ones who don't want to have accountability for their actions. The ones who really don't want to mature. They don't want to grow up. They don't want to face the mirror. They don't want to face themselves. Those are the people who will have a fit when you let go. What do you mean you're not giving me more money? I can't believe you're not going to help me. Oh, they lay it on. That is why I will always tell you, when you do this work, you need some healthy people in your corner to hold on to while you deal with this stuff. That's why I think the course is a great place for you to have a group of folks who are working on the same stuff here that you are. The Facebook group is a wonderful place to be, and sign up for coaching if you want some one-on-one support in addition to all that from me. So let's talk about some good things about detachment. And I have people, when I work with relationships, I have people tell me, Mary, it's so nice they've backed off. Let me figure it out. So people who are ready to take care of self really appreciate it. And that's why it creates a space for healthier interactions. I think detachment creates a space for deeper connections and a greater sense of inner peace for both of you. The other thing that helps with that is if you are able to grieve, like we've talked about here before, that's where you open the door to healing, growth, and a renewed sense of self for you. It's not fun to walk through it, but there's magic on the other side. So let's talk about how detachment allows for the emotional space necessary for healthy boundaries. So remember, it's not about disconnecting from other people or becoming indifferent. Rather, it's about creating the emotional space necessary for healthy boundaries to thrive. When we detach, we allow ourselves the freedom, I think, to step back, observe, have a clear head, without getting all entangled in the emotions, thoughts, and actions of others, and then enmeshing your stuff with theirs. Like, how can you say no to someone and still be worried about their reaction or their behavior? You can't. You have pretty much fused yourself with them. So, like I was just saying, here's where it gets interesting, because I think detachment is the cornerstone of effective boundary setting. You can't do good boundaries without them. If we're tangled up in other people's mess, how can we possibly set limits? We can't. If you're a stakeholder in what their decisions are going to be, there's no way you can have clarity on what is best for you and what is best for them as a person. What is best for their highest good down the road if I really care about them? Well, it's probably not me bailing them out. It's probably not me telling them what they need to do. It's probably not me rescuing them from lessons they need to learn. Stop here for a moment and think about a time, recent or past, where someone did not come on a white horse to rescue you from your own lessons that you had to learn, and you didn't like that, and you sat in it and you figured it out, and how much better it felt, and how much it changed you. Maybe you became more disciplined. Maybe you became more self-aware. Maybe you became more mature. That's what I mean by what is for their highest good down the road. The other thing is what is good for the relationship. You can't rescue and respect the same person. You can't not resent them eventually. So how can we assert ourselves, stand up for what's right, and communicate our needs if we're enmeshed with them? If we're all caught up in someone else's emotions or actions, our boundaries become blurred. We'll probably find ourselves saying yes when we mean no. We're probably going to allow behaviors that make us uncomfortable and we regret later. Maybe we stay silent when our instincts are screaming otherwise. And guess what? We know that's a recipe for unhealthy relationships, no matter how we try to convince ourselves otherwise. So let's say you have a friend who constantly relies on you for emotional support, but their behavior is so draining, and it really leaves you overwhelmed. Without detachment, you'll probably find yourself caught up in their drama, absorbing their emotions, and guess what happens next? You start neglecting your own needs. Raise your hand if this has happened to you and you don't notice it till later. I haven't gotten my bills paid or my laundry done or my self-care or nurtured my other relationships that I quickly put to the wayside to deal with this drama. That's why detachment is magic. It allows us to take a step back and assess the situation from a place of clarity, like real thinking. It gives us the opportunity to recognize when our boundaries are being crossed as well. That's a big deal. And to respond from a position of strength rather than reactivity, fear. Like we said a moment ago, you're not going to set boundaries with someone if you're in the midst of people pleasing and making them happy and fixing them. If you want to be seen as lovely, you're not going to want to say no. So let's summarize. What are some great things about detaching? We get clarity. It allows us to see the situation more objectively. We can see the reality. We can, and this is important, hopefully see someone for where they are. Whether their behavior is in alignment with our values and whether our boundaries are being respected. That's really key. Because a lot of times, that's a slippery slope. If someone came up and punched you, that would be obvious. You'd walk away and say, no mas, I don't want anything to do with that person. But typically, that's not the way it works. It's very subtle, it's very insidious, and it's the frog in warm water, so you don't see it. Detaching helps you protect your energy. You safeguard your emotional and your mental well-being. And you prevent yourself from being drained by others' emotions and problems, even if they're not asking you to fix them. If you don't have good boundaries and detachment, you may make it about you. Without detachment, we can't set boundaries. So it's the foundation of what boundaries are built upon. Who owns what? It promotes our self-care. It allows us to prioritize our own well-being and needs without feeling selfish or guilty. Eventually, if you're first starting to work on this, Yeah, you're going to have that guilt come up, and you're going to have healthy people to talk you and walk you through this. The other thing that isn't talked about as much either is until we learn detachment, we don't really grow. But when we start detaching and start going within and focusing on our own stuff, I think it creates a space for personal growth and good self-discovery. We can look at our own values, our own desires, our own boundaries, and make choices that align with our true selves, separate from other people. And I want to stop here for a second, especially if you grew up with people who did not respect your boundaries, you didn't set great boundaries with them. So especially if you grew up with people who didn't have great boundaries and therefore yours were not honored, it's going to be even harder for you to feel a healthy separateness from other people. The detachament's really important for you to go sit with healthy people or sit with yourself, journal, think about where you are, and to let yourself tap into your intuition and your feelings. Let's remind ourselves about why this can be hard. So if you're working on this and you're struggling, you are not alone. It's a process. It's going to take you some time, and just be patient. So setting boundaries, we know, is not always easy. And here's why. It can mean letting go of patterns, dynamics, or even relationships that no longer serve our well-being, and that's not easy. So this process of letting go can really bring a whole bunch of emotions up, including sadness, grief, and even guilt. And it's really important to acknowledge and honor these feelings in a safe space with safe people, and know that they're just a natural part of the journey towards healthier boundaries. Because again, when you detach, you focus on, what am I feeling? What do I need right now? What's really hard for me? And do you see how that defines you separate from other people? It sounds woo-woo, but it's not. And I would argue we really can't own who we really are until we own the grief. We own what we really feel. We own what we really fear. All the vulnerable stuff. So one of the losses is a loss of familiar dynamics, how we used to roll. Because when we set boundaries, we're essentially changing all that in our relationships. This can mean saying no to behaviors that you once accepted. Maybe you're asserting needs where you were quiet before and didn't say anything. And as you do this, you're going to grieve the loss of familiar patterns, routines, and ways of interacting, no matter how jacked up they were. Change is loss, and that means letting go of control. And being able to trust that this new way that I'm promising you will be better for you is good. And it's going to be okay. And it's going to be okay. And it's going to be okay. Letting go of unhealthy patterns. So these patterns have oftentimes been ingrained for years at this point. And we're talking about saying no to people-pleasing behaviors, saying no to codependent behaviors, no to enabling harmful actions. I mean, this is a huge paradigm shift for you. It's life-changing, and I see it change lives in my clients, and it's pretty amazing. It's not easy. Because as we release these patterns, we're probably going to experience a sense of loss or emptiness. Because remember, we don't do vacuums very well. But it's like saying goodbye to an old version of yourself, one that was once defined by these unhealthy dynamics. This can be painful in a good way, and it's a necessary step towards growth and healing. I think one of the biggest challenges of boundary setting, though, is the possibility of certain relationships changing or even coming to an end. I mean, some people can't handle it. This could be due to the other person's inability to respect your boundaries. And then your paths kind of diverge as you grow. They can't handle it. They don't want to operate that way. They take no as a rejection. The other thing, too, is as you work on your boundaries, you decide what you will tolerate and what you won't, what you deserve and what you don't. And it's going to be really hard to reconcile having that person in your inner circle and allowing them to treat you poorly when one of your new values is, I don't let people do that. or I love myself too much for that. Another hurdle is facing guilt and self-doubt. So throughout this whole process, you're going to face feelings of guilt and self-doubt. Everyone does. It's normal. You're going to question whether you're doing the right thing. You're going to worry about hurting others by asserting your needs. I mean, you're trying to sort all through this, like what's healthy, what's not, what's a healthy boundary versus control. That is why, again, it takes a while to do boundary work, and you can't do it alone. Guilt is also a common reaction to change, especially when it involves prioritizing your own well-being. If that is a foreign thing, if you haven't done that in the past, if you've been given messages like, who do you think you are? Or how selfish can you be? Spoken by the selfish person being projected onto you, of course. Honoring the grief process is so important here, and allowing yourself to muddle through it imperfectly in a non-linear fashion is the way to go. It means letting yourself feel the feelings that you're able to feel without judgment or suppression. It's okay to cry, be angry, feel lost, get love and support, be frustrated. And it really means seeking support from healthy people. But when you start to really prioritize your own needs and values, you're going to step into some serious self-love. And that is a big, courageous step. Because you're finally going to be honoring yourself. But what no one talks about is you're going to be honoring them even better. I often have clients go back to their partner and say, you know what, I'm so sorry. That was so disrespectful last night when I told you what you should do. You're grown, you can figure it out, and I'm here to support you. But I gave you unsolicited advice, and that's me overstepping. I need to detach and allow you to figure it out. And then within your own heart, you're saying, and I need to sit with the possibility of that won't end well. That's my grief work, that's not theirs. Boundary work, detachment, and grieving are the three legs of the stool I talk about often. Can't do one without the others. And oftentimes we're working all three, which may seem overwhelming, but for some reason it's not. But if you're starting out on this journey, get some support and help. Read a lot, talk to people. You're going to have to talk ad nauseum about what is healthy, what isn't, so that you can change your brain. And that you emotionally can get used to healthy separateness from others, which will allow you to feel your feelings, aka the grief. But you have to stop, and you have to be mindful, and you have to get honest, and you have to tell on yourself in a loving way. And be ready for relationships to change, oftentimes for the better, and sometimes end and everything in between. If we want different and healthy, it can't be the same as it is today. And I know we all would want our cake and eat it too. We want to set boundaries and have everyone be happy with us, and for everyone on their side to change at the same pace that we are, of course. So here are a few things I want you to practice. Practice awareness of how caught up you are in other people's business. Don't beat yourself up. No shaming comments, no inner critic. Just say, that's interesting. Just notice. Number 2, practice on the inside, at least, in your heart, saying I statements. Well, how do I feel about that? Oh, what's my fear if they make that decision? So you're practicing in your heart and your mind, separating, teasing out one from the other. Their stuff, your stuff. Journaling is a wonderful thing to do here just to practice self-awareness. I think it's really important to seek support. You want your good friend or your coach or your support group to say, of course you're freaked out. You're so afraid of letting go of what he's going to do. Because you need that validation, and you need the support and the strength of the group to get you through it. Be very gentle with yourself, lots of self-compassion. If there's trauma involved in this, get some therapeutic support around that. Take your time, work this as you go, and know that it's going to take a minute to get through all of this, but every time you detach, it's better. Every time you let go, it's healthier. And you deserve the peace of mind that comes from this work. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Heavy stuff, good stuff. If you're working on this already, pat yourself on the back. If this is brand new, welcome aboard. It's going to be a ride, but it's going to be a great destination that you're going to get to. If you don't get the newsletter, hit the link in the show notes and check it out at ownitpowercast.com. It has everything in there that you need. And if you think someone else can benefit from this podcast, pass it along. All right, pay it forward. Keep focusing on you, and I'll see you next time.
We hope you took away some useful insights and tools you could begin using right away. If you did, please leave a positive review and share on your social media. Because could you imagine if everyone in your life really got it together? Remember, own it now, so you can really own it later.